Let's start at the beginning. The very first in-flight meal was served on a flight from London to Paris in the year 1919. This flight was operated by Handley Page Transport, one of the early pioneering airlines in the United Kingdom. The aircraft used for this historic journey was a Handley Page Type O, a biplane aircraft that could carry a limited number of passengers. The in-flight meal served during this journey was rather rudimentary by today's standards. Passengers were provided with a lunchbox, including a simple sandwich, some fruit, and possibly a sweeter pastry. The primary purpose of this meal was to provide sustenance to passengers during the flight, but also as a distraction to how unglamorous early aviation really was, as these early aircraft did not have the comforts or amenities of modern airplanes. For example, there was no bathroom on board, so if a passenger had an urgent need during the flight, they might have to notify a flight attendant. Depending on the severity of the circumstance, the flight attendant might provide a makeshift solution, such as a bedpan or container, as a make-do, with no privacy, of course. And as bad as that sounds, there were worse issues. For example, the non-pressurized cabins could cause immense inner ear pain. Turbulence was not yet fully understood and hence impossible to avoid, not to mention the noise and actual real danger that flying entailed. Yet air travel was relatively exclusive and expensive, with passengers well dressed for their flights. These were the type of customers with little tolerance for inconvenience. So to really scale aviation as a business, airlines needed to compete with the luxury and prestige associated with ocean liners. And they did. Fast forward a few decades, and by the 1960s, airlines enjoyed celebrity endorsements, in-flight chefs, and glamorous lounges. The image and practicality of the jetliner were so awe-inspiring that transatlantic ocean liners and steam trains disappeared practically overnight. 1960s aviation food was more boisterous than ever, with gourmet cuisine inspired by international flavors. Passengers could enjoy dishes such as beef Wellington, coq au vin, and lobster, presented on fine china with real silverware and glassware. And what's perhaps most surprising about this is that even coach passengers had it well, with warm meals and sandwiches that would be considered a first-class standard on most modern airlines. Today, we set out to recreate that experience.
Apparently, between 1950s and 1980s, the fashion in airplane cuisine was going through some waves. So, for example, there was a period where French cuisine was the most important, and they took a lot of inspiration from that. And on the other hand, there was another wave where old-fashioned American cuisine, this very classic one, was also in style. I loved looking at all these old photos with like really nice dressed people, like elegant ladies and elegant gentlemen, and the platter full of everything. Tiny sandwiches, like lots of cold meat, some fruit, and the presentation was amazing. For example, I appreciate the fact that sometimes they were using ingredients that were not very common in the general cuisine, like for example these tiny quail eggs. And if you splash your food with caviar, everything is way more sophisticated.
So what about the onboard kitchen appliances? Well, in the 1930s, airplanes got bigger and more spacious. This era also marked the first time that food was heated mid-flight. In some cases, airplanes had small lounges where people socialized and enjoyed their food, newly improved by increased knowledge of how food tastes at higher altitude. And once the tray table became an industry standard, passengers came to expect food on every flight, even short ones, in the comfort of their own seat. In the 1940s, William L. Maxon found a solution by offering a round plate of frozen food called the Sky Plate that could be heated up in a special onboard oven. And I'd like to really emphasize what an innovation this was. You see, with World War II underway, even the Navy brought the idea to their own logistics, as this process allowed large amounts of food to be reheated all at once, feeding people more efficiently and reducing waste. The 1950s saw airplane food become a luxury of its own, as female flight attendants gained the reputation as, quote, waitresses of the air. In this era, economy as a travel class was officially recognized, but even that class dined on gourmet meals like stuffed guinea hen. The first class featured dishes like hors d'oeuvres, cocktails, caviar, and lobster. In the 1960s, even bigger planes and rolling carts made their debut, allowing airlines to serve more passengers than ever before. However, in the 1970s, the practice of handing out packed peanuts came into fashion, and although unannounced to the public at large, this was very symbolic as a first step towards the ultra-economy flights we now have. By the 1980s, times were changing fast, and high demand for air travel required airlines to cut costs. One famous example was the chief executive of American Airlines saving the company $40,000 by removing one olive from the first-class salad. Things evolved from there until the tragedy of 9/11, when the airlines would suffer massively, causing them to pinch pennies wherever possible. One of the first things to go was in-flight meal service. In some airlines, food became a separate, purchasable package, but meals were grab and go, and outright disgusting in some cases. There was also the issue of allergy concern, ending the decades-long tradition of serving peanuts. With that in mind, airline food was changed forever. As Kasia prepares these wraps, I should probably point out that while food at 30,000 feet in the air may seem like a plane-only pleasure, food was enjoyed in plenty of other aircraft long before the first airplane flight took place. For example, in Zeppelins, multi-course dinners were served in elegant dining rooms, but the food had to be cooked without a flame for fear of explosion. Brilliantly, the Zeppelin cooks were able to jerry-rig a rudimentary induction stove to cook their meals safely. Even before that, though, the 18th century hot air balloons took to the skies with bottles of champagne, as the awe-inspired, sometimes terrified onlookers enjoyed views of French farmlands from above. So perhaps romantically, since it's been a possibility, people have always chosen to eat something up in the sky.
So here it is. Would you like to try that? Here we are, European style of a platter.
When flying through the air, food taste is affected in various ways. Salt and sugar loses up to 30% of taste, leaving passengers with a bland flavor in their mouth. Airlines solve this by simply adding more of the affected seasoning, and the trade-off frequently is an upset stomach. At the same time, tomato juice, which is rich in umami, begins to taste much better at higher altitudes. Those little wine bottles even have an enhanced effect due to the mild reduction in oxygen, also gaining a tonic and acidic taste. This was realized in the 1930s when passengers used tomato juice to mix in their alcoholic drinks. With that in mind, it's important to remember that when food is served on an airplane, many of its culinary traditions have been passed down to the modern day. You did such an amazing job. It really gives a feeling, an imagination for what class the world had, at least on airplanes back then, right? So how did it work? Did the stewardess just let you kind of choose what you want from the platter? Did she go ahead and put it on your plate?
She would usually come to you with the choice, and you would indicate, maybe you would use this kind of, how do we say, tweezers?
I don't know.
Yourself, but you know, the plane was waggly. So.
I read that turbulence was huge back then, and that fancy food on airplanes goes back to like basically the beginning of passenger aviation, because they had to figure out how to package and sell this product to people who were like, you know, I don't want to go in a tin can above the earth and potentially die. And they're like, well, you know, we'll give you caviar and steak, so it's good. All right, at the risk of me seeming chauvinistic, would you play the stewardess and I'll play the 1950s businessman, you know, with a big cigar, waiting for the pretty lady to give him food?
Of course, I would love that. So.
And trust me, in our house, we're very modern. Normally, I'm doing all the cooking and the cleaning, and right?
Oh yes, Pinocchio, you are.
We don't want to get canceled.
Let me fix your plate, dear.
Oh wow, see?
Okay, and a little bit of fruit.
Got a cigarette hanging out of my mouth on this side, can of
Blowing-
booze in my hands on
blowing
that
into my
side,
face.
right? That's what's going on in the
No,
airplane.
that wasn't actually can. That would have to be like glass of champagne.
Indeed, indeed. Anyways, I'm going to do some big business in New York. All right, I'm going to start with the bologna, I guess.
That's actually fun.
I don't know if they added bologna and cheese. Well, we're using our imagination, so. Incredible.
Very good.
I can see why Mr. Moneybags would demand such food on the airplane, you know. Okay, let's give a sample of this caviar. So that's French mustard,
Yes.
quail egg,
Yeah.
and some kind of fish eggs.
And pumpernickel bread.
Okay, whatever that is.
It's good for you.
If we were in a plane with a bunch of elitists, and it was like the 1950s, 60s, I would pretend like I like that.
Okay, you can present now. Don't worry.
What I can tell you guys is that our little time travel experiment in aviation today was amazing. And if there are any airlines that provide this kind of food, expect me to climb aboard. I hate flying, it's so undignified. You get searched, you gotta wait in line.
Well,
I'll just stay home and eat this.